Hi, I'm Larry Richardson, your step-by-step chef. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to make an all-purpose stuffing. This is a stuffing that goes great with fish, with chicken, with pork chops, as a side dish. It goes great with turkey. I mean, all you'd have to do is add a little bit of sage and you would have a great Thanksgiving stuffing. But that's not the purpose, the singular purpose of this stuffing. This stuffing is made to go with everything. So come on, let's cook. So here are the very basic ingredients we're going to use for our stuffing for every occasion. First of all, we have 3 pieces of toasted farmhouse white bread and 2 pieces of honey wheat bread toasted. So together there's 5 pieces of bread. We also are going to use a ½ cup of chicken broth, and use whatever chicken broth you prefer, 3 tablespoons of butter, 5 garlic cloves, 1 celery stalk. We're going to use a ½ cup of minced onion. We're going to use a tablespoon of rosemary, fresh rosemary, a tablespoon of fresh oregano, and 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley. We're also going to use a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. Now, if you can't get fresh herbs where you live right now, and at certain times of the year they can be hard to find, you're more than welcome to use a tablespoon and maybe a little bit more of dried Italian seasonings. Just don't go too strong on the dried Italian seasonings the first time you make it, because they can be pretty potent. Another ingredient you may want to have on hand when you make this is sage powder. Now, sage powder will make it taste a little bit more like a Thanksgiving stuffing, but I don't like to use that version on all of the different meals that I make, and I don't like to use that version as a side. But if you are having your Thanksgiving turkey, or you really enjoy that sagey taste, certainly add a teaspoon or so of sage to this recipe. So come on, let me show you how to put this all together. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do is mince our vegetables. And we want these to be very small pieces. So I'm taking this 1 celery stick and I'm turning it into 3. So there you go. And then what I'm going to do is just very thinly cut the celery stick. You don't want huge chunks of celery in your stuffing. You can cut it even finer than this if you want. This is about the right size that I like it. I still like it to have some presence in our stuffing. Okay, so we're just putting that in our large mixing bowl. And then we're going to do the same with our onion. Just finely mince it. And all I'm doing is I'm scoring the top of the onion. Make the lines pretty close together. Then I'm coming back, scoring that same direction. And now I'm just doing it perpendicular. And then I just cut down the face, and that'll give us nice little pieces of onion. Now, as usual, if you want to add more or less of any of these ingredients, feel free to. I recommend that you try it my way the first time, and then you make it your way the next time. This way you'll get to know what the classic recipe is like, and then you can decide, well, geez, I like it better with more onion or less onion or no onion. I mean, there's so many different ways to make these dishes. So it's totally up to you, but I do recommend that you try it this way the first time. Now what we're going to do is slice our bread into cubes. I have this very inexpensive food processor. In fact, it comes with this handle so you can make smoothies with it if you want. It has like a bunch of different adapters. So let me just show you how it works. So then you just put this top in it and you go like that. It's a very inexpensive, let me just try to show you the whole thing. Well, this is like Star Wars. It's a very inexpensive food processor. Hopefully it is within your reach if you go and take a look at one. Or you can buy a very expensive one if you have that kind of money. I certainly don't. But you just take it, and what we're going to do is we're going to cube the bread. Now, if you don't have one of these, just finely cube the bread and you're gonna be fine. I like this because it takes some of the bread and it turns a little bit of it into dust. It breaks the pieces into uneven shapes, and it just gives it a much more stuffing, I guess stuffing-y? That sounds like a good word. Consistency. So it just makes it more like stuffings that you've had before. So all we're going to do is take this bread, and this is only 2 of our 5 slices. This is a farmhouse white bread, and a honey wheat. Now I did pre-toast this, and you know it's just about short of being burned. You want it nice and crispy. And then you also want to make sure that after you toast it, you let it cool down. Because if you try to work with it when it's still hot, then I find that these breads, which are very starchy and almost a little bit sugary, they just kind of stick. They get all sticky. And it makes it more difficult to work with the food processor. And in fact, even just to slice it. So there's our bread. And then all I do is I take my knife and I just cut it into little pieces. And I'm going to do this for all 5 pieces of bread. And I'd imagine for you watching this, it is like watching paint dry. But let me just show you what I want to do as we go along. Okay, so what I want to do is just keep adding the bread until my food processor is full. Now, this food processor holds about 3 pieces of bread before it reaches the top. So I have to do this food processing in 2 batches. And let me just chop this up. I'm going to fill up the food processor container, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we have our cubed bread. I filled up the food processor container here, and I put the extras over in this bowl. And then again, we still have our onion and our celery in this bowl. And now what we're going to do is work with our garlic and our herbs. So the first thing I want to do is take the garlic and crush it. Now, if you don't have one of these crushers, you can certainly finely mince the garlic or crush it with the side of a knife. The main objective is to get rid of the paper and get this garlic into the recipe in as small a size as possible. And we want to release as much of the garlic oil, which is where all the flavor is, as possible. So you can see I'm just using this crusher, takes the paper right off, and puts the garlic right into this dish. If you like lots of garlic, feel free to add more cloves of garlic. I like about 5 is right for me for this dish, even though I am a garlic hound. Mainly I like 5 because it doesn't take over the dish completely. But if you were making some other dish, or if this was a side dish to something that can stand up to garlic, then you might want to add a little bit more. But I just find that 5 is just perfect. Oh, I love that aroma. It is delicious. Okay, so that does it for the garlic. Now, with the herbs, if these were really fine herbs with very small stems, kind of like this example piece, then I would just chop it directly and put it in the food processor. But because they're a little bit stemmy, I'm going to take all of the leaves off of the, this is the oregano, to make sure that I don't end up with kind of a chewy stuffing. There are times when the herbs are just perfect and you can do some slicing. Cilantro can be very much like that because it's so delicate. But some of these other herbs, they get a little bit woodsy. And I don't want anyone to say, wow, this sure is chewy chewy stuffing because I included sticks in it. So it's worth taking the time to get the leaves off of the stems. Rosemary is another one where it's always worth it to do some picking, because it tends to be kind of pine needly to begin with, and if you start throwing that stem in there, it's just it's just going to get chewy. Now I can tell you, these herbs smell delicious. I always have an herb garden going, or I always try to have an herb garden going, because just nothing beats this. They just add so much aroma and flavor and texture to so many dishes. They just freshen it right up. So if you have the patience, the wherewithal, and you live in a place where herbs will grow okay, and they are very forgiving, even if you just leave them in the pot you purchase them in, then I really recommend it. I really think you're going to notice a huge difference in your cooking when you use fresh herbs. That said, if you have no access to fresh herbs, remember, you can substitute dried Italian seasonings in this dish. I'd use about a tablespoon to start. Then, you might even want to test it after we give it the quick cooking we're going to in a couple of minutes. Give it a little tasting. And if you like the way it tastes, leave it right where it is. If you think it needs a little bit more of the dried seasonings, then add it. And again, the other ingredient that you can add is sage. And again, that will give it a little bit more of a Thanksgiving kind of taste, which is really, that's not what I go for every dish. In fact, I think the only time I like that is around Thanksgiving, served with turkey. But if you're a huge fan, then certainly go for it. Add that sage. Now this parsley, the stems were very tiny, so I am able to just go down it, get those leaves, but I am mincing it really fine so that there aren't any big pieces of stem in it. Okay, that should do it for the parsley. And then I'm just going to take all of these herbs, and I'm just going to give them a little bit of a chop before I put them in the food processor. And the reason I do this is that the food processor has to kind of work hard just to chop up the breadcrumbs. So if I do a little starter on the herbs, then they get to be food processed much smaller, in much smaller pieces. Okay, so there's our herb mix. And since I'm going to have to use the food processor twice, because I have so many breadcrumbs, I'm going to put half of the herbs, half of them into the food processor container, and I'll save the other half for the second half. Okay, so now I'm going to cover the food processor container, get the handle, and will take about a minute. I'm tilting it so you can see. I'm tilting it so you can see what's going on. And do pulse it as you do this. It kind of shakes it up a little bit, and it changes some of the order of the way the ingredients are spinning. So more of it gets to the blade. Okay, so a minute later, that'll do it. And what I want to show you is that I didn't turn this into powder. I did not turn this into bread dust. There is still some nice bread chunk in there, and you can see that the herbs are mixed in quite nicely too. And I'm just going to put that in our mixing bowl. And now I'm going to do the second half, and again, I'm not going to make you sit around and watch that. So I'll be right back. So here are our breadcrumbs with the herbs all worked into it. Now I'm going to add my 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Our teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just going to give it a good stir. I want to get those herbs mixed in with the onion and the celery too. So you can see it's already starting to look very stuffing-y, which I think was one of our words from earlier. Right? That looks like a stuffing. That looks like the real deal. And boy, the aroma. You can smell the herbs, you can smell the garlic, the onion, even the sweetness from the bread. I drool every time I make this. So I'll meet you over at the stove. And this large saucepan has preheated over medium heat for about 5 minutes. And I'm just going to add our butter and melt that down. Okay, and then what I want to do is take our 1/2 cup of chicken broth and pour that in. And then I want to just bring this up to a simmer. When I start to see little bubbles, then I can add the stuffing mix. Okay, so you can see we have simmering going on now. So I am just spooning in the mix. Now I'm working around a tripod, so it looks a little bit awkward, but I think I can get this done without getting stuffing all over the place. And then what I'm going to do is turn and stir this so that everything gets equally moist with the butter and the broth. Now if you like a wetter stuffing, you can certainly add another 1/4 to 1/2 cup of broth, or even another tablespoon of butter. I don't really like my stuffing wet, so this is like a very nice moist consistency without getting soggy. Yes. Okay, looks like everything is nicely coated. Okay, now here's where we can discuss our options with this stuffing. If you want to serve it on its own as a side, then what I would do is just take this glass bowl with the stuffing in it, preheat my oven to 350, and put it in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. It'll get nice and crispy on top and will make an excellent side. Other options are you can use it to cover pork chops, boneless pork chops with bones. You can do chicken breasts or fish. You know, you can cover just about any meat, poultry, or fish with this. I mean, I even use it for baked stuffed scallops too. And I have the recipes for those on stepbystepchef.com for most of those that you can use this stuffing for. So again, what I'm going to do in this case is use it as a side. So I preheated my oven to 350 and I'm going to put it in for 20 to 25 minutes until it looks nice and crispy. So I'll see you shortly. So congratulations, look at what you just did. You just made this delicious homemade stuffing. Whether you use it as a side dish with chicken, fish, pork, shellfish, you name it, you're going to find it very delicious. Now if you like this dish, please take a look at my website, stepbystepchef.com. There you're going to find recipes and videos for dozens of delicious dishes just like this, and I show you how to make them the step-by-step way. I'm Larry Richardson. I am your step-by-step chef, and I'll see you in the next episode.